Welcome, everybody, to another edition of Digital Identity 360. We're delighted to have Catherine Petralia from Kabbage today. She's the co-founder there joining us. Welcome, Catherine.
Thanks for having me.
As well. Catherine, it's interesting. We've been talking back and forth in prep for the webcast, about some of the things we're seeing as it relates to digital identities and credentialing and so forth. And it struck me this morning coming into the office, the incessant number of almost daily breaches that we're seeing. I wanted to touch base with you on what's the impact you're seeing in your business generally, and maybe the digital commerce world, at large, as a result of these breaches.
We get asked the question a lot because we have a lot of customer data. We're a little bit unique in that we don't have credentials for our customers. Our customers give us access to data they use to run their business. So it could be their checking account, it could be their accounting data, payment processing information, shipping, social. And we don't actually get their credentials. We're participating in this data sharing environment where these APIs and OAuth is used to get access to the data. But still, we do have sensitive information of our customers. And so we take all the usual precautions to protect that,
right.
Whether it's physical security or access controls, encryption, all the things that you would expect to do. But I think it does make customers a little bit wary, and it raises a lot of questions, and we spend a lot of time on it.
Yeah, especially in light of somebody like the Capitol Hill hearings this week and what's happening with data in general. And I'm sure you guys are going through maybe a GDPR exercise. We are. As it relates. Yeah, so you can imagine it reminds me of Y2K all over again with all of the stuff we're going through to get ready. But, it's interesting what we see. We do this cybersecurity report every quarter, and we see the impact of these breaches manifesting themselves in identity spoofing, device spoofing, and identity spoofing, where the bad guys are trying to open accounts on services like Kabbage. I mean, Kabbage performs a great service, capital into the marketplace for business folks. Do you see any of that impact where, those kind of credentials eventually try to wind their way into your organization? And obviously, somewhat self-servingly, how does ThreatMetrix help you with that?
We see a little bit of effort, I think, to get into our systems from external forces. I'm going to say something that I don't really mean, but, on the one hand, you're sort of like, oh man, somebody cares about us. That's pretty cool that somebody cares. But on the other hand, it's really terrifying because you don't want to be, at the tip of that spear, so to speak. And we are grateful for our work with ThreatMetrix because we really keep a lot of folks out who, never even have a chance to try because of all of the data that you guys have and help us prevent that.
Yeah, for sure. One of the interesting things that we see that it's a mantra around here that the old forms of authentication and identity don't travel well in the digital world. You and I spoke briefly about social security numbers and some of those, real world, analog kind of identifiers. Why don't you speak a little bit to kind of your view on where the future of those identity, components are headed?
I'm glad you asked. I have an opinion on that matter. I think the thing that was frustrating about the Equifax data breach for me was obviously nobody wants their information out there. The problem with that particular breach was that the information could be used to obtain credit in someone else's. So, and that is because of the social security number. This particular identifier was never intended to be used to verify identification, but now it's used, it's critical for healthcare, for education, for financial services. And so there needs to be a different way. If giant, densely populated countries like Indonesia and India can tackle this identity issue, then I think we can do it too. And we just need another way to be sure that somebody is who they say they are. And those 9 digits aren't cutting it.
Yeah, it's interesting because if you think about it, there's 2 problems I think that we see across our customer base. Number one, the amount of time and effort necessary to test those credentials. I mean, the latency is crazy, so you can't spend 6, 7, 8, 9 minutes reaching out to some other data source to see if they're real. And number 2, you may not know they're compromised for months and months and months because someone spoofed the identity and used it. So we agree with you, and really this is our focus on trying to use digital identities to kind of replace some of those traditional authenticators. Your point, some of the developing countries in the underbanked world, these people are, for example, topping up their mobile phone every day. They have a good credit history based on activity, but they have no identifiers. And that activity and behavior is proving to be just as good an identifier as it relates to credentialing as something like a social might be.
We totally agree. I mean, every one of our identities is available for sale, for a quarter somewhere online. So it almost doesn't matter at this point trying to protect those numbers because you know that they're there. I think finding other ways to verify identity is really important. And it's not just important for Kabbage because we want to make sure that, we don't make a loan to somebody who's not going to pay us back. It's important to us as a country because we want to verify that the people we don't want to have access to capital and access to financial products, like terrorists and money launderers, those folks are able to get around a lot of these rules because of the way we use Social Security numbers. So we're actually supporting our very own best efforts to protect our country.
Yeah, isn't that interesting? If you think of it, it's funny you mentioned that. So the government thinks of macro threats, attacks on infrastructure, attacks on important, the electrical system, the water system. But we're seeing it both, ThreatMetrix as your partner and you obviously as an important customer at the micro level, where, as you said, the way to fund these things is to get, spoof the identity, spoof the device, bring it to an account and use that. And it strikes me certainly in the banking world online and fintech in general that the stakes are much higher because, you rip off an e-commerce company, it's bad, a digital camera walks out of the building. But, talk a little bit, if you don't mind, Catherine, about the impact across fintech in general, because I think the imperative to deploy capital so quickly makes it a very lucrative target.
I totally agree. And I think people are just now becoming aware of it. I think the advantage that we have in small business lending is that you have to actually demonstrate that you're a business. So it's hard to, unlike synthetic identity fraud, where you just take over someone's identity and if they have a good credit score, that's all it takes. You have to have an identity that matches the identity of the business owner and matches the identity of the checking account and matches the identity of the accounting platform or whatever the service may be using. So it's happened where people have actually, it's sort of like, I'm familiar with the idea of a bust out where somebody comes in and takes over a business and then buys a bunch of stuff and, then runs away. So that's happened, a couple of times in our industry, and we've seen it across different vendors. But it's hard to do because you really have to be able to get access to all of those accounts for that business, and that's challenging.
Yeah, I mean, in your world, you're right. Synthesizing identity for a business loan is much more difficult than for maybe a personal loan. So, for sure. Well, Catherine, we're delighted at the opportunity to chat today. Is there any closing thoughts you want to leave us with about Kabbage or the industry in general?
I think about the industry in general is we're all really excited about the opportunity to participate in some sort of new paradigm for verifying identity. We'd be happy to participate in building it if the government wanted to let us.
That's true.
Just tell us where to start and where to sign, and we're there. So hopefully this is just the beginning of a much deeper dialogue.
Awesome. Well, there you heard it, folks. Catherine, thank you so much. We're delighted to be your partner, and congratulations on the continued success in the business.
Thanks so much for having me.
All right. Thank you.